Hello and welcome to today's episode. How are you today, Amber?
I'm well. How about you, Martin?
I'm doing fabulous today. Today is a topic that I know you and I have talked about on many occasions, but I think it's really important to put into the world so that we've got a bigger context. And it is literally the topic. The word I'm going to use is intuition or instinct in projects.
Mm,
When you
yeah.
there's how things are going
Yep.
and how we feel about how things are going, and those are not always the same thing.
So true. Yeah. So, what's the ultimate question that you want to ask? Or
Well,
do you just want to talk about
yeah, so
what
I want
that
to talk
is?
about instinct as a what is it,
Okay.
but also because it does tend to be an intangible, it's
Yeah,
sometimes hard to say to someone, hey, this is the intangible I want to stop the whole project on.
I know.
How do we articulate those spaces around intangibles in such a way that people will understand them?
Yeah, good question. The first thing that I thought of is around this idea of culture on the project. There's cultures in organizations, and those are like the environment around where we work and what we're doing. But there's also, independent of the organization, there's a project culture that starts. And, for me, certainly in the projects that I work with, it starts with that forming the team charter, which hopefully you have the opportunity to do in every project. I understand that not everyone practicing project management uses a team charter to kind of create that camaraderie, but I highly encourage people to do it because it sort of helps get literally the close group that are going to work on the project on the same page. But, the terms we speak of in that team charter, the way we agree to collaborate, the rules of engagement that we set for one another, they create a culture. And then that culture, of course, is either sustained or maintained by how much each person that wrote the team charter abides by what they agreed to. And I think this is where the intuition often for me comes in, because if you have created a project culture where you have said from day one, we all have roles, we all have jobs, but we also want to recognize that each of us is gifted and skilled in ways that may not be represented in our title. And we still, as humans and as professionals, want to leverage those other gifts and skills that may not be representative of our roles, which can include things like, do you often have deep emotional beliefs or feelings about certain things that happen in a project? Not everyone does. Not everyone has emotional attachment to work decisions, but some people do. And of course, they work really hard oftentimes to hide that. And I think if you have a culture where that's not hidden and it's encouraged to come out, then you have this ability to kind of foster I like to call it Spidey-Sense, but it's mostly because I was born in the 70s and I grew up with Spider-Man, and we used to talk about having a Spidey sense. And so, like, I just refer to it as, everything on the project on paper looks good, but there's something nagging. And you kind of perhaps feel it in your gut, or even as a small team, you have like a Spidey sense that the last conversation you had that with that key interest holder, they said words and you heard the words they said, but for some reason you're just still as a group kind of suspicious that they either didn't mean it or they were using those words as a strategy or as a tactic. And there's something about it that just seems unsettling. And a lot of project teams that create this kind of environment can leverage each other in those moments. So I would say that kind of gut sense or intuition, let's say, can be really helpful because it isn't all what it is on paper. I mean, you know that.
Mhm.
Talk to me about your experience in the military and working in sort of project driven, whether they were formal projects or whether they were like, we're on a task together. Like, there's what you say you're going to do, there's what you've been told you're going to do, and then there's what's happening and then how everyone feels about it. And like, doesn't at some point the intuition from even the training that you've had has to kick in? And it's like, on paper, I know this doesn't make sense, but I feel like we got to move in this way. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, Here's what let me start first with. So when I'm speaking about intuition, what
Mm,
I'm talking about is a knowing that's happening inside my intellect
okay.
that I cannot associate data to.
Right. And I would say your gut.
Yeah. So gut, spidey sense, whatever it
Right.
is, Certainly, especially in combat situations, you'll be in space where you'll know your body is giving you information and feedback.
Got it.
This is not good, but
Mm,
I can't give you the, "Oh, I saw something over there, or there's that." I'm not sure what the data is, but it's a total data collection. Our brains are data collection devices, right? That's what they're
right,
doing.
right.
And so I tend to look at intuition as some part of what's happening
Mm.
in a way that we can't articulate.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so, whether that's on ship, whether that's in the field, or whether that's in a project,
Mhm.
certainly there are times where things are happening that and you said it best there, where someone is either being, you can talk to someone and they'll give you information.
Yeah,
And from that information, there's pure data.
right,
Here is the data presented. The
right,
transcript of this conversation will be pure data,
right.
but there's nuance that will be
Uh-huh.
lost in that transcript
Mhm.
from this conversation.
Correct.
It will do beautiful job of getting every word,
That's true.
but it will have lost some of what we were really talking about in subtext.
Yeah, because communication is, only 7% verbal. 93% of human communication is nonverbal and paraverbal. And of course, what's in the nonverbal and the paraverbal is all the other stuff. So the fact that, in our podcast, we only do audio, people are really leaning towards the tone and the diction and the intonation of our words to actually begin to get a feel for what we think about what we're talking about. This happens in projects all the time. So, case in point, that same scenario that I just gave, where you're having a conversation with an interest holder. What if it's an email from an interest holder? And the black and white of the email is the data's on track, but there's something about the way they've put the words together that makes you just, wonder, do they really mean that? And I think, I'll full disclosure, I'm feisty. This is who I am. I have often been that person on a project where I'm the one going, am I the only one in the room who doesn't feel good about this? And oftentimes I'm the only one in the room who doesn't feel good about it because I am feeling something that others perhaps aren't able to feel because, quite honestly, they're just not uniquely me. That doesn't make me better. It just makes me different or unique. And I think this is the uniqueness of gifts and skills that I think, in a project environment, when you can leverage what people bring to the table, no matter what those gifts are, you can actually use people's intuition. The other thing that intuition, I think, is very much informed by at an energetic level in a human is their history, their meta programming, their values, their beliefs, their previous experiences. So I have a friend who actually I spent some time with recently who was incredibly hurt in a professional setting a few years ago, and they lost their job over it. And it wasn't, I would say, necessarily anything that they did to cause that. So there's no cause and effect going on. It was just simply circumstance. They got caught in the midst of that. But the way it was handled and the culture and the environment with in how this happened, they were left devastated. I would argue even traumatized. Fast forward to today, and they've got something going on in their world professionally right now that is scratching at some of the vulnerabilities that they're still holding from the very traumatic experience a few years ago. It's casting a shade of red over their ability to read the data, I would say. And I mean, I say this, I would be in the same situation. So would you. So there's absolutely no blame to be cast here on this individual. But they are really struggling to see the black and white data because they are feeling the trauma from a few years ago. And then they are seeing the similarities in this situation. And that's motivating their decision making. And that's tough, right? In fact, we even went back and forth recently about it. And they were like, I really wish I had just waited one more day before I responded. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's almost like, how do we build in that time frame? Because we want to try to sort out our previous history, our experiences, and all that other stuff that can cloud our judgment, so that we're making decisions that are data informed and that have our emotions in it, but that they're not driven by our emotions solely. And that's hard, really hard to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that space around, you can put together the perfect team on paper.
Mhm.
The best in every That's my change management specialist. That's
Right,
my person who always brings it in on budget.
right.
You can bring all those people together, and that doesn't mean you've got the best running team.
Agreed,
Yeah.
agreed.
So, but I like where you were going there with that emotional piece,
Mhm.
because in that emotional piece, and I like, 'cause when we come to the table as a team, we can make our charter. But I'll tell you, just from my own experience, two things happen with that charter. One, not everyone sees the words the same. You hear integrity, I hear integrity. We hear two very different integrities.
That's true, that's true.
And the other thing is and I'll put it this one because it's right to what you're speaking to, which is around voice.
Mm,
What's my voice at the table? That's what the charter says. But when do I bring my voice? Because,
mm,
like you just said, people bring themselves
mm.
into the room. Some of those voices, and we all know them, are the people who have no problem saying a word. That's you and I. We have no problem saying a word. In fact, my difficulty is I have to stop saying words so other people can say words. Um, but some people's voices,
Mhm.
where you can tell there's something on their face. You can see, I mean, you and I have been at it a long time. You can see the intuitions on their face.
Yeah.
How do we foster that space called voice on our team that makes it safe enough for a voice to come out?
Oh, I mean, this is the hard part because we have to think about what's motivating people to be in the room in the first place. And I think, strategic motivators for everyone, every individual has a motivation. They have a motivation to show up to work that day. They have a motivation to be on the project. They have a motivation. And the thing is that we would like to think, oh, but we signed a contract, we have a job, we have a title. That's our motivation to fulfill what we've committed to. But that's not reality. The reality is other stuff's going on in everybody's life. And all of those things contribute to these, underlying what's your motivation? I know a lot of people that right now are motivated to go to work because they're close to retirement. And their motivation is I just want to retire. And so I'm just going to put my head down, stay focused, and get the job done. And, whether you think that's great or not, it's still fine. Someone with that motivation can still deliver on project. They can deliver on time. They can deliver on schedule. But when it comes to leveraging their emotions, that may not be what we want to do because they're really coming at it from a very different perspective. They're motivated to just be there so they can then not be there in the, you know, not so far off
Yeah.
future. And like I said, like that is important. So when you're writing that team charter, like you said, and I loved that you said that, the way you interpret integrity and the way I interpret integrity would be different. And I agree with you. And even though we've known each other for a long time and we have, I would say, similar thoughts about integrity, we actually aren't in agreement about what that looks like. And so even we, in writing a team charter, would have a hard time reading it off the page and making it real to ourselves the same way. But this is the hard work of human communication and that sort of ongoing teamwork thing. So, when I talk about the team life cycle and Tuckman's team life cycle, when I teach about it, I'm always reminded of the fact that the teams that are most likely to succeed at a high performing level, they have to have been teams that have stormed and normed in cycle multiple times. Like it's without a doubt, you don't get a high performing team until they have been through the ringer with one another. And it's not even once. It's not that they had one conflict and they fought about it and then, okay, we settled it and yay. And now we're going to perform at a high level. It's not that it doesn't work that way. It literally means they storm oftentimes even about the same thing multiple times over and over and over again. And they have seasons of storming and then some norming and back to storming. And then finally, like miraculously almost, one storm, it just kind of fixes the team. And that final storm becomes the greatest kind of predictor of that high performing team. But you don't get there without all of that. And I think it's because what storming and norming cycles do is they create trust and respect if we do them well. If we recognize, you know what, sometimes I'm going to, F up. and I'm going to say some stuff that I shouldn't have said, and I'm going to feel shitty about it, and I may or may not be able to see my ego in it, and I may not apologize soon enough, and that is going to foster a lack of safety for people on the team, and it's going to suck, and people are going to get mad, and then we're going to do all that, and then perhaps with time, um, and and my desire to not live there for long, hopefully I'll relegate my ego, make some appropriate apologies, have some people go, okay, you did suck. Me admit, yeah, I did. And gradually team trust and respect starts to grow. And sometimes it's very small because let's face it, if the person isn't even able to admit that they did anything, that can take a long time to begin to respect them. But when and if they get there, you create this little bit of trust, and then that can beget more. And then another storm comes, and hopefully we've learned from the last one. And in that cycle, we have the potential to then get to a high performing team. And I would also argue, I give the example of high performing team. That's what I think a highly intuitive, emotional, connected team is, because a high performing team is a place where they are high performing because people who feel things can voice them at that high performing level, and it's credible, it's respected, and also the team comes together to analyze, okay, if you're feeling that, let's break that down. What evidence do we have? If you're feeling that that last interest holder email really wasn't the full truth, let's break down what we know. And a high performing team has the ability to do that because they can create enough safety because they have trust and respect mutually to just spin and start to unpack that. And so the intuition of a team person, or the emotion that's being felt that can be shared, can become really tremendous benefit to making good decisions. We talk about expert judgment in a project environment, and how do you have expert judgment? And it's not a thing you get. It's not a certification you earn. It's not a school you went to. Your expert judgment is the sum total parts of every experience you've ever gone through as a human, and hopefully your applied learning in all of it. The hard part is a lot of us maybe haven't done as much learning in the hard parts as we could and should. Cue, we all need therapy to help integrate, or at least I would say we all need executive coaching or professional coaching to sort of help process some of this. But, the intuition, it's a powerful thing, but you've got to be able to be trusted and feel respected to share it.
So I really love what you said there, because it actually sat in two camps in my brain. The first camp is specifically around intuition as a vibe.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is, as you were talking about high performing teams working like that, I was just imagining jazz musicians that
mm,
they didn't make a plan, but they're
yeah,
using intuition off
yeah,
of the other person
yeah.
to play with that person. Because I know you're going to move this way, and I'm going to move this way. And when we get to this part of the song, I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to do something cool right here.
Well, and you're admitting, I'm going to watch you do that cool thing, and then I'm going to be agile enough
Yeah.
to move with it or alongside it.
Well, and if I'm going to be super meta about that, I would argue that our conversations are exactly because we don't go in with a plan in any of these conversations.
No, you always tell me the topic the moment that you press record.
That's
So
right.
I have no preparation.
And I may have some ideas on what to
Yeah,
ask, but where you take it
yeah.
takes the questions, because that's what we're doing in real life. And that's the space.
So what you're saying is we live exercise
We live exercise
this
intuition.
intuition.
Yeah.
Okay. Spidey-Sense.
Yes. We're Spidey sensing with each other at all times.
I don't mean to insult Spider-Man, by the way, when I make that reference. It's just the little kid in me who remembers watching Saturday morning cartoons. When Spider-Man would come on, I would remember, oh, right, all the fun cartoons are over. Because I technically wasn't that into Spider-Man, but I would watch it because it was like the buffer episode between Spider-Man and then stuff I really didn't want to watch. like,
The
like
news.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you got like Spider-Man was the last one, and then after that, I was like, I'm out. So yeah, I don't, no offense to Spider-Man fanatics, and but yeah, Spidey-Sense is just how I've always
Oh
kind of
no,
termed
no.
it.
And as you well know,
I know,
I am a Spider fan,
I
so
know.
uh but just because it comes from the language of superheroing doesn't mean that it isn't something that we all use
Yeah,
because we all understand that spider sense.
I think so.
So if the first thing that came to mind from what you just said was specifically about how we intuit with each other, the other one was, and I liked this, and I don't know that you use these words, but I certainly heard this as a tone, was intuition as feedback. That there's a feedback message in here. There's something data happening internally and as a team that we've got. And how do we process this feedback? Because first is the safety to put the feedback in the room. The second is the what do we do with the feedback once it's in the room?
Yeah, so I think of an example that I see quite often, which is something is said in the room that comes across as someone's putting emotion, like this is how I'm feeling, or this is what I feel might be going on. And instead of everyone in the room feeling safe enough to have ears to hear it, one or two or many immediately jump to the defensive, and they start to explain away why someone's got it wrong, or you can't be right, you don't understand, or and I think it's a very natural human emotion, because essentially what those individuals are doing is they're trying to protect their own interest, because oftentimes that feedback speaks to their work or to the type of work that they're trying to put in. And this is the tough part, because high performing teams that have high trust and respect of one another will skip a beat before they defend themselves. They will ask curious questions of the feedback first. They will literally relegate their own egos, not because they feel they're wrong, because they may very well feel and know they're right. But they're okay to suspend that long enough so the curiosity and the conversation can start flowing. And I think this takes a high level of emotional intelligence on an individual's part. And this is also what I see a lot of times in a professional work environment, in a project team. You have some incredible professionals, some of them arguably incredibly sophisticated project managers or project team members. They've been at this for 20, 30 years. And yet, when feedback comes, they immediately defend themselves. And what they don't understand in that moment is they're telling the group that they don't have enough maturity to just suspend that for a moment and just talk about it in safety, in like literal cultural safety. So that's difficult because and this would be what I would argue. This is why you need to get a coach. This is why you need executive coaching, professional coaching, or therapy, or I would argue a combination of all of them. It's completely human to want to defend, when you get feedback, because it's, well, but I didn't mean it that way. Whoa, 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 whoa. Nobody's talking about that right now. In that moment of the feedback coming out, let's just bash it around. Almost like the feedback is the third thing in the room. And it's we as a team are here, and then that is a different thing. And we're on the same side, and the feedback is on another side. So we're all looking at it, not feeling threatened, and letting our emotions, our intuition kind of help guide us. But a lot of really amazing professionals struggle with that because they haven't really adapted their emotional intelligence to that level of self-regulation to just stop talking, listen more, and engage curiosity before you get a chance to say, well, here's what it was from my perspective. And I think this is a great killer of intuition on project teams, because I think we all have it. We all have spidey senses, but a lot of us don't feel comfortable sharing it because we are anticipating people's feedback to be immediately defense.
So beautiful. As we start to wrap things up, then, what is the what is your best advice in a couple of minutes to someone who's got that spidey senses going off
Mm.
on how to bring that to the table?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, I do think what's important is to think about the culture that you're going to be speaking into. And, as a coach, I would certainly advise clients when I'm coaching them in this. Self-awareness is also about understanding your environment and being able to make some sort of critical judgment about what that environment is capable to hear and feel and see. And if you're at a different stage and you feel like you're seeing something, it's important to build a strategy on how to share it. So, just at a basic communication level, if you have someone on that team that every time you speak, they just tend to not hear you, and you already have that sense with them, or they hear you poorly at first and it takes some time to process, prepare for that. Like, literally prepare the environment. And that could be as much as saying, hey, so I want to bring something to the table. I also want to give you guys a hypothesis that I'm feeling might happen. I feel if I say this, I might get this type of emotional response from so and so. I might get this from so and so. I want you to understand I value all of that. What I would love to try to do is to have agreement that I could say it and we could all think it through before perhaps those reactions are what we start to deal with. And actually saying something like that very diplomatically to a close project team, that could be really helpful. But that also could be too much vulnerability, because if the project team you're working on doesn't have that kind of culture, then there's a huge risk in you doing that. And I think this is where also you get the opportunity to feel physically impacted in a negative way with your not feeling safe enough to share, what your spidey senses are telling you. And this is a difficult thing because not all of our workplaces have fostered this in a healthy way. And I can't answer how to do it in every way because every single scenario is unique and different. I would just say this is why you need a support system as a professional. And you need, your key colleagues that you can share quite transparently with, or a third party coach or something that you can reflect that to, and then they can actually give you some confidence to prepare well, or perhaps not to. There are times where doing nothing may feel like a waste of your own resources, but in reality, in benefit to the overall project team and what's going on, may be the best way. Because lessons learned are just that. Sometimes we can't see the full picture until it's in hindsight. And so sometimes we just aren't going to get it. You're just not going to have that ability to share and to be honest. And I don't mean to be dishonest. I mean to not disclose. And sometimes it is important to just feel that empowerment. Like, you don't always have to walk in and lay yourself bare in every meeting, because that can be too much vulnerability. And that also, depending on the culture of the team, could be so far beyond what anyone else on the team is capable of in a professional environment that you will possibly also feel like you are not respected because of that move.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. I hear you trusting your intuition, even as you're responding to intuition. And I want
We
to
could have
thank
gone
you.
longer on this topic, I
We
tell you.
could have gone for a lot more, but that's why you come back for the next episode.
Yes.
Thanks so much for today.
Bye.
Bye bye.